Yeah, this setup never gets any better, does it? Oh well. I did like reassemble everything. So now things are a little bit better in some ways and a little bit worse in others. And that's really that trade-off is really uh, what I'm ranting about now. People do not understand trade-off. They just think everything's completely disconnected and separated. And there was a movement for a while where people were using the term separation of concerns. Separation of concerns is an excellent term, by the way, um, when applied properly, because you can't separate the term from its application. It's almost like reality is that which relates or something. Look up the etymology. I did not. Someone else did and said, "What do you think of this?" And I was like, "Well, it seems kind of obvious, but also super important because nobody understands this term at all now. It's a disaster." So, how does that affect software? Well, like I said, we used to use the term separation of concerns. And I think I've mentioned this in the past. I had, well, my best friend, actually. Um, the way I met him was I was working at a company called Parametric Technology Corporation, which is now called PTC. Um, worst management ever. Uh, Stupid people. So dumb. It's when I learned people that run corporations aren't necessarily very bright and they make retarded mistakes, absolutely retarded mistakes sometimes, because they just see the world differently, right? When he got there, his job was to put in a version control system called ClearCase. Now, let me be clear. ClearCase is the best version control system that you could ever write. Like, it's fantastic. It supports all the useful workflows that you can imagine and more. It is great. I was a ClearCase engineer. I knew ClearCase pretty well. I mean, not super well. We didn't do we we were running a very specific 24/7 around the globe software development operation, right? In the late 90s across multiple platforms. I think PTC had 16, mostly Unix, mostly Unix. I was working on some Linux port stuff, but I never got to finish it because the reason why my now best friend was there was because when they bought computer vision, they bought computer vision. I'm almost positive they bought computer vision not even because they were like, this is our rival and we remember splitting away from computer vision and starting Parametric Technology Corporation. This one guy pretty much started it um, from computer vision. Uh, but it was the legacy of that idea, I think, is the reason why they bought computer vision, which was at the time was 3 months or so from bankruptcy. And when they did this, aside from being a stupid idea, they should have let them go bankrupt. That actually almost put PTC out of business, that decision, because it was so poorly thought out and poorly implemented. The second mistake that they made was they took the entire middle level management of computer vision, the company that was about to go bankrupt, um, and put them in the middle of our organization. So it's like, why would you do this? These people are failures. Why would you let them run your successful company? I don't know. So the guy I suddenly worked for, I used to report, it was my boss to the VP. The guy knew the VP of engineering, whatever. He used to call on me for special projects, right? So now I've got this other boss, Italian guy. Look, it's not that he wasn't a nice person. He's a horrible manager. Horrible, horrible manager. Just atrocious. Right? He wanted to put ClearCase in. Now, the thing was, I think I've talked about this before somewhere on my channel, but I got into an argument with my now best friend about version control because this is early days for organized version control that scales at Fortune 500 level. We'll say a big software, right? I mean, our product shipped on multiple CDs. I know we're all whatever, but they wrote every line of that code. Like every line of the code they shipped was written in-house. Every line. None of this was imported libraries. I mean, there might have been a few like standard C library imports or whatever, but whatever. That was, that's minor compared to the number of lines we wrote, right? That was a lot of lines of code, millions and millions of lines of code, millions and millions, but handwritten, no library, no imports, no frameworks, none of that garbage. It's all garbage, by the way. There are a few exceptions. There's some good frameworks out there, but do you know what they are? Because I bet you don't. So we've been doing this successfully for a long time. And he's in here going, well, ClearCase, you could do this, you could do that. I'm like, we already do all this. We already have all these protections. Why do we need this? And it was a very long argument. I think in the end I did convince him because the rollout of ClearCase was a flat pack disaster because there's too much of a change, right? You can't just roll into a development organization, especially a large development organization, and start changing stuff and expect that the developers are going to be fine with it or whatever. That's not how that works. And sometimes you need radical change. So it's decisions like that are actually important. I mean, you're always going to piss somebody off because everything's a trade-off, right? That's where good management shows up, right? Like the ability to make those decisions, make them quickly, even if you're wrong, and recover from them quickly in case you're wrong. But even if you're right, you've got to recover, actually. Because if you're right, a bunch of other things are going to change that you didn't see, and you have to recover from those changes too. And it might be good changes, but you still have to recover, right? The classic example of that is the successful company, the successful startup, right? Their marketing campaign succeeds, and now they need to triple their engineering team. Like I've seen that a bunch of times, and they get wiped out, like almost all of them. It's very hard to scale fast. It's very hard to scale fast. You need really good people. You're better off with fewer people who are better. So effectively, the method that we had was we had a level of separation of concerns, or several levels of separation of concerns. The lowest separation of concern was the file. Okay, so every C.C or .h file in the company pretty much had a header on it in the comments that said who owned that file. Okay. Now, I don't remember how many developers were at PTC when I was there. It was a lot, though. I mean, hundreds, right? So, of mostly very good C programmers, by the way. When we went to do the integration, the merge, the release, right? Release was a big deal. I was kind of the VP of engineering ran the release himself. Like he was a crazy person, crazy German guy. I liked him a lot, but working with him was hard. Not harder than the Italian idiot we got from computer vision, but still difficult. So I wasn't quote in release. That wasn't my job, right? Like nothing to do with the release, basically. Except, I knew all the engineers. I was the liaison. I was the IT liaison. It's a nice title I made up for myself. Worked very well, by the way, for years. And so I worked between the IT department, development department, and helped my boss run the entire QA system, which was, we had a lab of, I forget how many machines, right? Because we had duplicates, like you needed 2 Sun machines. But then we also ran the labs for all the corporations that had lab space in our building. So that was Sun, that was Digital Equipment Corporation, that was Intergraph, which you won't know. No one knows who Intergraph is. Wonderful company, though. HP. There was at least one other one. I can't remember. I think Sun had the biggest lab. So all those projects, and any developer problem, developers needed some infrastructure or whatever, we would help them get it. Usually we would get it for them from IT because having developers and IT people talk is usually a recipe for disaster, and it should be that way. Like that is the way. There is no other way. It's not true because the separation of concerns, right? IT people need to be concerned with networks and big picture things. And engineers need to be concerned with writing their freaking code, not attending stand-up meetings, writing code, right? Not explaining their code to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that wants to understand it better. Writing good code. That's your concern. It's be separate from everything else. Now, do you need meetings? Yes, you need a once a week meeting. I'm telling you guys, 35 years, nothing works better. Nothing. And nothing ever will. And you can model mathematically why that would be the case. Now, the problem is most of the software engineers are terrible and they suck. And it must suck to suck. I've said that before. That is still true. Okay. But if you're a good software engineer, you should be able to sit there, work for a week. You don't have to come out with meaningful product that you can show users. That's bullshit. That's garbage. That's a trash way to think about software. Quality software requires time. How much time? I don't know. What are you trying to do, dude? Let me know. You can't just whip out a good search algorithm in a week because you feel like it. Now, are there people that can do that? I have no doubt. Are you them? There's no freaking way you're them. Sorry, it doesn't happen. And you never will be. Sorry. Some capabilities, you need some combination of born with skill and luck. And you didn't get that. That already didn't happen to you. So get over it. And if you know I'm wrong about that, then maybe you're right and you don't care and you just go, oh, Mark's wrong and blah, blah, blah. That's fine. I don't care. I don't even know who you are. It'll be fine. It'll be totally fine. Don't get mad. Don't get mad. Just go prove me wrong by writing an algorithm in a week that does search better or something. I don't care. It makes no difference to me. I'll never see it because you'll be working all by yourself and no one will ever know anything you do. Good luck. Right? But this separation concerns. But at the higher level, the separation of concerns was these software engineers owned those files. The release engineering team would only take the copy of those files from the engineer whose name was in the top of the comments. Bang, version control solved. Well, how does that solve version control? It's easy. I see your file. Like everybody had access to everybody else's code, right? It was a little sloppy at times, but like it worked. Like it wasn't as good as Git, which is not a version control system. It is a distributed merge tool. You can also do version control with it, but I'll get into that in a bit. Just because it came up oddly. So my life is strange. So when you start looking at somebody else's file and you go, well, if I made these changes, blah, blah, you go off and make those changes to your copy. And then you copy the file, you make the changes, you compile it, you test it. Oh yeah, this change would work. Then you go back to that person and say, hey, I want you to make the following changes in my file. See how that works? The thing is, code review is now automatic and not optional. I mean, this just has a tremendous number of advantages. It's like, wait a minute. You were doing code review before anybody used the term. Before Agile, before... Yes. Yes, in the 90s. Yes, a long time ago. Right. And so it's built in to any good release ideal. And I think PTC released quarterly. And I think it was minor releases and one major release a year or something. But also, extremely profitable software, right? Because they were maintenance per seat software. Yeah, I know back then, I don't know if this is still true because I haven't worked at PTC since the 90s. BMW used their software to design the cars. We had modules that could do electrical systems and things like that, but mostly it was just standard fare CAD CAM software. And Dassault Systems was the big rival even back then, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it was Computer Vision, Dassault. PTC came later, I think. I don't know, it was too long ago. Don't get old. It's no good. So proper separation of concerns solves a bunch of problems. Like these problems, isn't it? It solves the problems. The problems never arise. Reviewing code already happens, right? And then the responsibility, right? The responsibility falls on the owner of the file, not on the person that made the change, which is way better. It's way better when you have a responsible party, right? And it also forces attributed cognition. I wrote this code. You get to look at this code. Bang. And it's just a better process than a code review. Now, does it substitute for code review? Not entirely, but maybe enough, right? Maybe. I don't know. And when your software is in file size chunks and not in method size chunks or tiny function calls or some other stupid thing that doesn't work, because you have too many objects to track effectively, and their integration matters more than their functionality. It's just life is easier. And so that gets me to one of the things. I probably lost 6 good ideas and to not being in a position to do recordings. But I saw this tool the other day. I don't know how it came up in my YouTube feed, because who knows? Who knows what that damn algorithm's doing? I can't tell. I was talking about this thing called JJ, which is written in Rust. And I was like, well, there's a waste of writing something in Rust, right? Because all it actually does is sit on top of Git and destroy a bunch of Git's features that you don't need as a single individual engineer. And that's actually, on the one hand, I'm not a fan. On the other hand, I'm like, well, it's a good separation of concerns, right? Single individual engineers don't need branches. Branching is a worthless task if you're working on your own machine by yourself. Complete waste of time. And that's what this demonstration of this tool called JJ, I forget what the J stand for now. I just don't remember. You look it up. You look up JJ Source Control or whatever, and it'll pop up. And it's written in Rust. Ugh. Garbage. So it does away with branches. So it just focuses on the local code merge. Well, guess what? As a developer working on even 7, 8, 9, 10 code bases, local code merge is all that you need. You don't need branches. That doesn't actually make any sense. What you want to do is hop from maybe source trunk to source trunk, right? In the old style, that would be directory to directory, project directory to project directory. See, like, this stuff works very well at the file system level, actually. I'm not, look, I'm not a no Git. Git is great. The number of things you can do with Git, the number of workflows that Git enables is amazing. Amazing. It's fantastic. It's unbelievably good, right? But also, Git is enabling workflows, right? It is not a version control tool at all. It is a tool that can be used for version control. JJ is not a version control tool in a way. I mean, it does sort of local version control, which I would argue is not version control. I used to do a copy file name .back. I still do. That's how much I think version control gets in the way as a single developer. And so, look, I'm not even saying like JJ is a bad idea. Actually, I think it's a good idea for a single developer, right? And you can use a single developer tool and roll up the usage of that tool to a larger release, right, with multiple people. That's not a problem. I just gave you how PTC did it in the 90s and early 2000s. It's not that hard, right? That can be done, and it's useful. So when you think about the world, you should think about the proper separation of concerns. And sort of the loss of the idea, the concept, we'll say, of separation of concerns is wrapped up in a lot of problems you see around you. Right? This isn't a software issue, right? It's a bigger issue with how we view the world. So here's the problem. If you think foreign wars halfway across the world are part of your concern, you have an improper separation of concerns. Will it affect you? Yes. Everything affects you, though. So that's not really saying very much at all. In fact, it's saying less than nothing. It's revealing the obvious to no effect, right? So the fact that that is what it is unhelpful, right? So when you have proper separation of concerns, particularly in software, proper separation of concerns in software enables all kinds of cool things. But just everything goes better. And you should have it not just in software, you should have it all over your life. And maybe you can't do that by yourself. Maybe you just need help, which is fine. Just ask people, should I pay attention to what's going on in some war halfway across the world right now? Or maybe a more nuanced question is, how much attention? Like, what should I know about this? And then, you got to rely on other people. Do you rely on experts? Never rely on experts. Rely on leaders. As leaders take responsibility. I know we have a dearth of leaders lately, but I don't know what else to say. Like, yeah, we need to fix that. That's a real problem, and that really needs to be fixed. It's true in software too, right? Like, agile is all about leaderless development. When you think about it, it's all about leaderless development, and leaderless development is disastrous on the whole, for the most part. And that's why software is devolving and not improving.